Hello everyone and welcome to another video. This is the first video in our series of tutorials designed to get you working with Matlab. Today's video focuses on the simple task of just getting started with Matlab. So we'll look at starting the program, setting up some preferences, getting a layout set out, and some very simple interaction with Matlab. We'll save the more complicated material for other dedicated tutorial videos. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so why don't we go ahead and just start Matlab? So if you've installed it on your machine, one of the easiest ways to start it is just obviously go to the Start menu and search for Matlab, or also during the installation process, typically it's going to put a icon to the executable here on your desktop, so you can go ahead and double click on that to get the program started, which is what I'm going to do right now. And you might get a little splash screen with some startup information. Unfortunately, that's on another screen of my computer right now, so you're not actually seeing the splash screen come up, but it's actually negotiating a license because I have a version of Matlab installed on my machine which requires me to communicate with a license server. But after that happens and I successfully am able to check out a license, Matlab will start up, and let me just drag it over here. This is what Matlab might look like for you, depending on how your administrator's got your system set up. The start screen or the first screen that you see upon starting Matlab might look a little bit differently, but this is actually what we want to set up right now. So to make this a little easier, let me go ahead and maximize this so we can see the entire Matlab window here, and let's go ahead and do a few things like set some preferences and add a layout that makes a little bit easier to get some work done. Alright, so typically Matlab's default preferences will be set appropriately, but let's just double check. So if you ever want to access any of the Matlab preferences, just come up here to the Home button, click on Preferences, and there's a couple places that we may want to look here. So one of the first things I'd like to point out here is if you just come here to Fonts, you'll notice here you'll be able to pick what type of font, and more importantly, especially for people like me that maybe don't have the best eyes, what size font do you want? So typically Matlab uses 10, which I've actually grown accustomed to, but I know a lot of people think that that's pretty small and hard to look at. So if you want to increase this, this is a very easy place to increase the size of your font, so when you're writing code it's a little bit easier to see. Again, I happen to have grown accustomed to 10, so let's just go ahead and leave that at 10. The other place that I'd like to draw your attention to here is if you come here to Editor/Debugger, and then come here to Backup Files. Earlier versions of Matlab used to have this option checked by default here, and it was actually very annoying because what you would see is that every so often, apparently every 5 minutes as it shows here in this setting, it would save an extra file which would be a autosave file, which would help you back up in case you lost something or in case something got corrupted. But in this day and age, I think with everyone hopefully locking down your files under some kind of version control system, having a backup and having an extraneous file in your file structure is a little bit cluttering, and it's a little bit cumbersome. So I really like to make sure that this is always checked to be off before I get started. So again, there are plenty of other preferences. There's tons of things you can mess around with in here, but to start off, I just wanted to draw your attention to those two. Again, just make sure that the autosave is off. That's all we wanted to do. All right, so since I didn't make any changes, I'll just go ahead and cancel out of these preferences. And we can now think about adding some extra windows to the environment. All right, so what I mean by windows here is that Matlab is an integrated development environment, right, or an IDE. It should have all of the tools that you need in order to write code, execute code, debug it, explore the file structure, all of that other kind of good stuff. So you may want to add a couple of those tools here to the Matlab environment so that you really don't need to leave Matlab when you're working on some software. So to do that, what I would recommend doing here is, again, come here to the Home tab and come out here to Layout, and then down here in the Show section, there are all these extra windows that you can add to the viewpoint. So what I would suggest here is let's turn on the current folder. You see this pops up over here on the side. I'll also come back here, and maybe I'd also like to see the workspace, and you may also want to see panel titles. Let's just turn on a couple more of these here. Maybe the tool strip, something like that. This looks pretty reasonable. And just to illustrate this, everything here ended up being docked here in my IDE. You see everything is in the Matlab window here. So if I minimize this and move it around, everything comes together. But it might happen that one of these are broken off and come off apart as a completely separate window here, right? So that might happen to you. If you want to fix that, all you need to do here is come to this little icon here in the upper right corner here, click on that and come here to dock. What dock will do is it will slam that here into, again, the one Matlab window. So now, yeah, you've got one single window which has all of these different tools ready for you to work with. Now, the last thing that I'd like to pull up here or add as a window here is the file editor or the text editor. This is where you're going to end up writing a lot of your code. So in order to get that to show up, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to come over and click on the New Script button. You can also come here on New and just say Script. Okay, so let's just click on this button here, New Script. And again, we see this editor show up, and once again, it's very likely that when you clicked on that button, if you haven't set this up before, that the code editor or the text editor, we'll talk a little bit more about it in a second here, but this editor might show up in a completely second window. Again, if you want to fix that, all you got to do is look for this little icon here in the top right and click on the dock editor here. And again, that will jam that into the single Matlab window here. So now we've got everything laid out here, but it's maybe not the way that you would prefer. What I like is I like to rearrange this so that usually I'm going to be writing a lot of the code here in the editor, so I like that to take up a lot of real estate. This command window over here is where you're actually going to be entering in commands on the fly. So if you want to do some rapid testing or iterations, you can enter commands into the command window. Some of these other things like the current folder will show you the file structure of where you're actually working right now, so you can see which other scripts or files or other objects are in the same folder. And we're going to see later on down here, this workspace is going to be showing you all of the different variables that are currently in scope. We'll get into all of these a little bit later, but again, for this getting started video, I just want to show you a feature here. Now that you have all of the different windows set up, you can actually move them around and manipulate the layout so that it suits your workflow or your liking. So what I like to do is, let's go ahead and maybe drag this current folder. Maybe I will, oh, this is nice. Maybe I like it to be tabbed behind the workspace. So as you can see, I can flip between both of these and they don't take up too much space. And this is actually very close to my preferred workspace layout. So if I kind of resize these and get them to be what I'd like, again, I have a big space for writing code. I have a reasonably sized space for entering in commands in the command window. And then I'm going to share this little corner down here between the workspace and the current folder that I can flip between with the mouse click. If you're happy with this layout, one of the things you can do here is if you actually come over to Home and you click on Layout, and you can go ahead and hit Save Layout because that's something that you would like. So I'm going to go ahead and call this, how about My Demo Layout? And hit OK. Great, so now this is saved. So if ever for some reason your layout gets messed up in the future, I don't know, maybe it looks like this. I'll just pick this. Somebody who came to your workstation and messed around with the settings and now you've got this weird layout that you're not familiar with, you can again just come up here to the Home, Layout, and select the layout that you saved. And bam, you're back to where you were and you're ready to do some work. So great. That shows you how to get your windows and your layout set up. Why don't we explore using a few of these different windows here to actually get some work done. Alright, so the first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is actually the command window up here that we've jammed in the upper right corner. You can actually use Matlab like a very simple calculator via the command window. So for example, if you want to know what is 3 plus 7 here, just type it in there and hit enter and it will give you the answer. Notice here that as soon as you entered that here, down in the workspace, you got a variable declared and created that's called ANS or answer with a value of 10 here. This is very interesting if you think about this a little longer, and for those some of you that might have some experience with other languages like C, C++, or C Sharp here, you'll notice that MATLAB actually dynamically allocates memory to store its variables, unlike some of those languages we mentioned earlier. So you don't actually have to declare the variables before using them. So in this case, it just made this variable called ANS to store the answer of my query of 3 plus 7. So we can extend this concept here. So for example, if I just want to make a variable called x, and I can assign that thing to the value of 3, and I'll just hit enter. Let's do another one. How about y gets 2? And then what I also like to point out here is let's go ahead and put a semicolon to the end of this, and we'll look at the difference. So as you can see, when you put the semicolon there, it actually suppresses the output to the command window. So the result of that will not be displayed out here in the command window, but both of these variables x and y are still going to be created down here in the workspace, regardless if the output was suppressed or not. So now you can start doing very simplistic operations like z is x plus y, right? And then if I enter that, it will just go ahead and do as you expect, right? All right, what else might we want to do here? Well, you notice here that the command window is getting a little bit cluttered at this point. You might want to clear this command window. So let's go ahead and use our first MATLAB function, which is CLC. So if you just type in CLC and hit enter, you'll see that what that did is it cleared the entire command window. So now might be a really good time to also mention the command help. So if you type in help space the name of any MATLAB function, then you can actually learn a little bit of information about that function. So in this case, remember we use this command CLC. So if I type help space CLC and hit enter, we're going to get a little bit of documentation here telling you about what that command does and how to use it. It also gives you some suggestions on other functions that you might want to do. And it's going to give you a nice hyperlink to a page where if you click on this, MATLAB will actually bring up a nice set of documentation on that function. So it's a really good interface to get some help on different functions, how to call them, how are they used, why could they be helpful, all that sort of stuff. So let me go ahead and close the command, the help documentation here. And again, I'll type in CLC to clear this command window. You'll notice here that when I cleared the command window, all that did was basically wipe the slate clean up here. It didn't erase any of the variables that were down here in my workspace. If I want to get rid of these variables down here and really start from scratch, I might want to use clear. So for example, let's say help clear. And you'll see if I scroll back up to the top here, what this thing does is it basically clears variables and functions from memory, which is exactly what I want to do if I want to, for example, get rid of all this stuff that's in the workspace. So again, let's scroll back down to the command window where I can put some input in, and I'll just type in clear, enter, and you see the workspace variables go away. And again, if I type in CLC and hit enter, I'm literally back to a blank slate here, right? I have nothing right here in the command window, and I have nothing down in the workspace. Now, however, let's say I want to go back and re-enter in some of those commands that I already did, like that x is equal to, I can't remember, what value do we use? I think we said x is equal to 3 and y is equal to 2. What if I wanted to change those? So I'm going to come here to the command window, and if you just push the up arrow on your keyboard, you're going to see that it's going to bring up this little dialog, which shows you basically a diary of all of the different commands that you've done over the past several iterations of your session. So here's the start of my session. You'll see I started doing some stuff, so I could say, oh, you know what, x, I don't really want that to be 3. I'll just click on this, and I could say x is, it was really supposed to be 5. And again, I'll push the up arrow to go ahead and find some of these other commands. Y really wasn't supposed to be, whoops, sorry, I double clicked on that, which actually entered it in. Let me come back here and click on this, come down here. Y wasn't supposed to be 2, it was supposed to be, pi, 3.1415. So I could type in, it's 3.1415. And actually, MATLAB is pretty smart here, and it's got a couple of these constants built in. So if I just type in pi, it actually knows what pi is. So if I hit enter there, check it out. Y is actually the value of pi. Great. So I think we are now a little bit comfortable navigating the command window in the workspace, but hopefully this last couple examples here where we were manually changing these values something should have been going clang in your head here, and you should have said, that is a pretty cumbersome way to actually make changes to your code and to your calculations here, right? It would be much nicer if I actually had some script or a text file or some actual thing that looked like code where I could rapidly iterate and change how the software operates, right? Rather than hunting and pecking around in my directory of commands here, this is not a very conducive way to get a lot of high quality software and analysis done. So let's go ahead and clear. Oops, I'm gonna have to get rid of all this. Let's clear the workspace, clear the command window, and let's start from scratch. So to do that, I'd like to bring your attention now over here to the editor. So the editor window is basically a text editor that's going to allow you to write, execute, and debug MATLAB code within the IDE. So one of the things we want to do is obviously let's start writing something down. So I could first say, x is equal to 3, y is equal to 2, and let's put the semicolon maybe on the y command just so we can see the difference here. And then we can say z is equal to x plus y, right? And this is our code here. It's really simple here, but this is actually a little bit easier because we see all of our commands laid out in a row here. We're free to go back and change any of these at any point here. So this is a much better workflow for actually writing complicated algorithms. So let's go ahead and now try to have MATLAB execute this script or this code here. So MATLAB typically refers to these as scripts. So in order to execute that, there's a couple of ways you can do this here. One of the ways you can do this here is you come up here to the Editor tab, and you just click on this Run button. And what it's going to do is it's going to execute the currently selected script here. So if I do this, MATLAB is actually going to make me save this first, because you'll notice I actually haven't saved this anywhere on my machine. So let's go ahead and try this right now. So I'm going to hit F5. I'm going to hit the Run button here, and it's going to bring me up with a save dialog. Let's just go ahead and save this here, and maybe my C drive. I'll go ahead and make a new folder here and call this Getting Started with MATLAB. Okay, and I'll go ahead and I'll title this something like Simple, or how about My Simple Script. And notice it saves it as a file extension .m. Okay, so if I go ahead and hit save, I'm going to get one more dialog box the first time I try to execute this script. So if we read this a little bit more closely, what it says here is, let me pull up that file here. I'm going to start a Windows Explorer instance here, and I'll come here to my C drive. And if you remember, we put this here in, where was it? Something like here. I can't even remember. What did we call this thing? It was something, oh here, yeah, getting started. Oh yeah, I accidentally clicked on it. All right, getting started with MATLAB. Here's the script that it's trying to execute. And if you notice here, the path of where the script is located, it's located in C, getting started with MATLAB here. If I look over here in the MATLAB IDE, MATLAB has the concept of a current working directory here, which is actually listed right here. So it says, MATLAB thinks I'm working in C, dev, u.matlab, u.matlab, which is a different location than where the script is actually located. So it's giving me this little warning here saying that, hey, that file that you saved, it's not in the current folder here, and I haven't told MATLAB about this path here to see getting started with MATLAB, so it wants to know, what do I want to do? 99% of the time, the right answer here is click on this Change Folder button. All that's going to do is it's going to change MATLAB's current working directory to the location of wherever you've saved this script. So I very rarely can think of an instance where you would ever want to hit this Add to Path button here. So what I would recommend doing is always just hit the Change Folder button here. So as soon as I do this, watch up here, and you should see our current working directory get switched to this location of C, getting started with MATLAB. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that. Here it is. This got changed to the current, to that directory we talked about. And if you look over here in the command window, my script actually ran top down. So it executed line 1, line 2, well, line 3 was really nothing here. And then it executed line 4 all in order here. And you can see this over here because look at this. X get equals 3 corresponds to line 1 because line 1, right, we did not actually suppress the output here with a semicolon, so it just got printed here to the command window. Line 2, we did suppress the output with a semicolon, so that's why you don't see any stuff about y being declared or assigned a value here in the command window, but it's still created here in the workspace because MATLAB actually executed that line of code here. Finally, if you come down here to the last line, z is equal to x plus y here, you see it show up here in the command window, and again, you see it show up down here in the workspace. So this is great here. Let me show you a couple other things to do with the editor. As you start writing more and more complicated code, I'm sure you guys are going to want to add comments to your code so you know what you're doing. So let's just go ahead and add a couple of comments at the beginning of this here. So I'll just hit enter a few times. To enter comments into MATLAB, the easiest way to do this is just type the % sign. So % is the start of a comment line here. So maybe I'll write my name, I'll write my contact information, and I'll write a little bit about what this script is doing here. So this script is used to illustrate simple concepts with MATLAB. Okay, and I'll go ahead and hit save here. And what I can now do is I can just re-edit this, or, why don't I make a couple of changes while I'm at it. I'll change this here to pi here, and I can now go ahead and click on the run button here to re-execute the script. Or if you hover over this, you'll notice that MATLAB's giving you another little hint here that you can actually press F5 to execute a script. So if it's too much work for you to come up here and click on this run button, just go ahead and save your script and then just hit F5, which I did right there, and it goes ahead and re-executes the script here. Now, you'll notice here that it's getting a little bit hard to understand where I executed each script. I mean, sure, it gives me a little bit of a notation here. I executed it for the first time. Here's the second time. What I always like to do with all of my scripts here is the very first command I start with is a clear. What that's going to do, we saw earlier, as soon as it hits line 5, it's going to blow away all of the variables that are defined in the workspace. So I am starting from scratch, so I won't be surprised and have a variable with a value that I'm not sure on what the actual value is because it was left over from the previous session. I want to avoid that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clear everything. And then the next thing I want to do here is let's clear the command window so this looks all nice and clean. So I'll go ahead and hit CLC. The last one, and maybe I'll leave this as an exercise for you here, for the viewer here, is I always also put in a close all statement. I'll let you read the manual on what this does, but really if you have any figures or plots open, this will also close all of them. So these 3 lines I put at the start of every single one of my scripts because that ensures I start from a clean slate here. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add a comment here and say, start simple calculations, something like that. So again, if I just hit F5, it will actually automatically save this. So I know I was mentioning I'm in the habit of hitting save a lot here, but if you want to just hit F5 or hit the run button, it will actually automatically save the script while you're at it. So tell you what, let's just go ahead and hit F5 again, and it ran it again here, and everything got back to a clean slate before it was executed here. Alright, so now that we've got this script set up, I'll admit it's not the most complicated thing, but I think we can use it to illustrate some examples about debugging. So I'm sure any of you that have written software before are probably wondering, how do I pause execution of the script at certain locations so I can inspect how the program or the script is executing here? So if you notice all of these little horizontal dashes next to some of these lines, what that's basically saying is these are locations where you can enable breakpoints. So if I would like to enable a breakpoint, all you have to do is just hit or click on that horizontal dash. It will turn into a red dot here. So let's put maybe let's put a few of them and scatter them around in different locations. So now when I actually run my script or hit F5, the script will start executing from the top down here, and it will pause when I reach one of these breakpoints here. So you notice this green arrow showed up. So all that's executed is the clear command, and you'll notice it's waiting here on the CLC command. You can see in the command window that it clearly has not executed yet. So it's now waiting for user input. So this is a great time if you want to inspect what the value of some different variables are or what variables are in scope at this point. This is a great tool to do this. So if you would like to continue, again, you can come up here to the editor, and here's a couple of options. You can continue running to the next breakpoint by just hitting F5. So if I do that, control should jump all the way down to line 10. Why don't we just try that? So there we go. It executed the CLC, it executed the close all. Now it's waiting on the x equals 3 command. So let's go ahead and here's another option. How about step? So if instead of hitting F5, I hit F10, this will just execute one line at a time. So I'll go click. Aha, that worked because, look at x is 3. That's kind of what I expected here. So let's go and step one more time. Yep, y looks about right. And let's just go ahead and step one more time. And now the little down arrow tells me it's ready to step out, or basically continue and finish. So if I go ahead and continue, there we go. I've basically exited debugging at this point. So at this point, I think we've gotten quite a bit done here, and hopefully people are feeling a little bit more comfortable about how to work with Matlab. The last thing we might want to look at is, now that we did all of this coding here, it's simple, but again, it illustrates the purposes. What I'd like to do now is maybe I want to save this file here. So maybe let's talk about what do you need to save in Matlab to make sure that you're able to come back or send this to a friend or a colleague and basically be able to pick up where you left off the next time you want to continue your work. So to do that, let's bring up my Windows Explorer again here. And again, go to this location here, see Getting Started with Matlab and mysimplescript.m, and it's sitting right here. And if you notice, Matlab is great because Matlab code is literally just ASCII text files, and there's just one thing to tote around right now. It's just the thing that has the .m extension here. So here's my my algorithm, my script, so I don't need any other secondary files. I can just email or save this single file to my version control or to my hard drive or whatever I want. To prove that to you, if you just right click on this and you just edit this thing with some text editor, you know, like open this thing with Notepad here. I'll do that and let me drag it over. You'll see it's basically, I mean, it is the exact same thing. They're just ASCII text files here. Of course, it's much nicer to edit this in Matlab here because Matlab gives you the nice color coding and all of that other kind of good stuff. But if you're in a pinch and you want to write some Matlab code, it's really just write it in a text editor here and you're good to go. So again, if you go ahead and just save this file to wherever you want, and you'll be ready to pick up where you left off and continue with your Matlab experience here. So with that, I think we've covered most of what I wanted to talk about in this very simple getting started with Matlab tutorial. So let's quickly take a look at a summary of what we've covered today. Alright, so to summarize what we talked about today, we first looked at how to go ahead and start Matlab. We then looked at modifying preferences here. We then covered how to activate various different windows in the Matlab IDE and also set that up as a custom layout. We then looked at how to use the command window to enter in simple commands or make simple calculations here. And then we quickly graduated into using the editor to write actually more complex scripts here that could be edited and debugged a lot easier, which naturally led into our discussion of writing, commenting, and how to debug code within the Matlab IDE. And then finally, the last thing we looked at here was, once you were all done, how should I save, or more importantly, what source code files do I need to save to make sure I don't lose any work when I want to come back to this. So hopefully this is a good way to get you started using Matlab here, and I hope you'll join us for some future videos where we will dive into some more advanced features and functions of Matlab. So until the next video, I hope you have a good one. I'll talk to you later. Bye.